Sydney, the question is that this bill be now read a second time. The member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Pleased to rise to speak on the Appropriations Bill, which gives the opportunity to raise a few pertinent issues. Firstly, Deputy Speaker, I would like to extend my thanks to New South Wales Senator Kristina Keneally for her fantastic promotion of the upcoming Conservative Political Action Conference. Senator Kenneally's comments have made sure that this conference gets very wide publicity in all the newspapers, Deputy Speaker, TV programs, talkback radios, and for that we must thank her, because the CPAC conference is the most highly respected and prestigious conference that has occurred annually in the USA for the last 46 years. We've seen previous speakers, President Ronald Reagan and President George W. Bush, and also the current President Donald Trump over recent years, Deputy Speaker. This year it is coming to Sydney for the first time. And we've got speakers such as, really radical speakers, Deputy Speaker, such as the former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson, former Labor leader Mark Latham, the former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman, my colleague Senator Amanda Stoker. We've got Nigel Farage from the Brexit Party, Janet Albertson, and Indigenous leaders, I know you're not laughing there, Indigenous leaders such as Warren Mundine and Jacinta Price. That's very, very nice, yes. This is the thing, Deputy Speaker. You know, you hope that Hansard cat caught that, what have you called it? Intervention, whatever you want to call it. Genuine people working hard in their Indigenous communities to uplift Indigenous Australians, and we have comments from the Labor Party, you can have them. That says everything, Deputy Speaker. Good people, Jacinta Price, Warren Mundine, being criticised for the Labor Party because they have a slightly different view about the way that we lift up Aboriginal and Indigenous Australians' prosperity and welfare, and the Labor Party vilify these people, Deputy Speaker. What a disgrace. But having said that, Deputy Speaker, I must confess that what we've heard from Senator Keneally, although I congratulate her for the publicity that she's given us, this is a very disturbing trend that we are seeing in our society, of wanting to, instead of debating someone that you disagree with and bringing their ideas out into the open, and if their ideas are wrong, ridiculing them, of instead silence, shutting down debate, censorship, Deputy Speaker. This is a track which we're heading down, which I see is very dangerous for the future of our nation. Another issue I'd like to raise, Deputy Speaker, especially at a time when we see many of our children, gullible and naive, being brainwashed in our schools and indoctrinated into a doomsday cult. Now, Deputy Speaker, one of my constituents sent me a copy of what is actually being taught in our schools in New South Wales. This is from a history textbook called Pearson's History New South Wales SB. This is what our children are being taught in school. And I'm quoting directly from the text. And it says here, government responses to climate change vary. And it goes on to a point here. Prime Minister Tony Abbott, elected September 2013, made international headlines as a climate change denier. He declared that scrapping the carbon tax was his top legislative priority. He abolished the Climate Commission, whose purpose was to provide information on global warming. Now let's just go through that statement. Remember, this is not something some commentator on the ABC, Deputy Speaker, or what someone's writing at the Socialist Alternative. This is in our New South Wales history textbook being taught to our kids in our schools today. So Tony Abbott made international headlines as a climate change denier. The denier slur is directly related to the Holocaust deniers, Deputy Speaker. It is an abhorrent use of the language. It has no place in our history textbooks whatsoever. And made international headlines. What international headlines? I asked the author of this text to explain what international headlines he's talking about. There were no such international headlines, Deputy Speaker. He has just simply made this up to suit a political agenda to brainwash kids in New South Wales schools. Then it goes on, he declared scrapping the carbon tax as his top legislative priority. Does he discuss why that was? That the carbon tax had no effect whatsoever on greenhouse gas emissions, it just increased the living for all Australians? Where was that ever discussed, Deputy Speaker? And then it goes on, he abolished the Climate Commission. Well, Deputy Speaker, he actually defunded it because we had a group of people simply spreading mindless propaganda, mainly one, yes, the tinfoil hat of Tim Flannery, who walked around the place saying it would never rain again. Even the rains that fall, Deputy Speaker, would never fill our dams. That was what our so-called Climate Commissioner was telling us, Deputy Speaker. And I remember that what Prime Minister Abbott said at the time. He said, why should the taxpayer fund these people when they are prepared to give their opinions for free? And yet we have, Deputy Speaker, this comments here. The Climate Commission wasn't to provide information. They were to provide disinformation, to run a cover for why the Labor government at the time could put in a carbon tax, which put up the price of electricity and put up the price of the cost of living for all Australians, Deputy Speaker. Now this article also goes on. It then talks about Prime Minister Julia Gillard. It says Prime Minister Julia Gillard, June 2010 to June 2013, introduced a minerals resource rent tax as a response to climate change. Now, Deputy Speaker, you were here on the floor of the Parliament when that minerals resource rent tax was introduced on the 1st of July 2012. I thought you were. I was here in that Parliament. I actually remember debating that bill and reading through the legislation and reading through the explanatory memoranda, and I couldn't find any mention to climate change on that bill whatsoever. I couldn't recall anything. So I went back and double-checked. Did I miss something? And no, the minerals resource rent tax that was brought in by the Labor Party had absolutely nothing to do with climate change whatsoever. It was a simple revenue-raising method on our resources sector. And here we have this being taught, again, Deputy Speaker, in a school textbook, something that is simply factually incorrect. This is the nonsense that is being taught to our children. If they get a basic fact like that wrong, how much else is wrong in this textbook and the nonsense that is being taught to our kids? And that also goes on, Deputy Speaker. It says, climate change is noticeable in Australia with more frequent extreme weather events. Where are they getting that from? If you look at any evidence, Deputy Speaker, and we have to look at this at evidence and we have to base it on the science, there is no evidence whatsoever that there are more frequent extreme weather events in Australia. Let's just have a look at some of what the science says, because I know there are some people in here that look at the science and look at the data, and there's others that believe in superstition and religion, Deputy Speaker. The peer-reviewed, what do we say about cyclones? Peer-reviewed study, Deputy Speaker, published in Nature in 2014, titled Australian Tropical Cyclone Activity Lower than at any time over the past 550 to 1,550 years. That is the science. You only have to look at the data from the Bureau of Meteorology on tropical cyclones landing in Australia, and the trend is down. So you simply cannot say that about tropical cyclones, Deputy Speaker. It is a complete nonsense. Again, the author of this text is just making stuff up without any reference to the science or the data to suit his political agenda. Then it goes on, Deputy Speaker, it talks about here the 2010-2011 Queensland floods were examples of more extreme weather. Well, we can go and have a look at the data, Deputy Speaker, again from the Bureau of Meteorology. And yes, those 2010-2011, they were extreme floods. But they are actually the 7th highest flood in Queensland recorded since 1841. And in fact, Deputy Speaker, there were 6 floods that were more significant of that, with the highest, Deputy Speaker, going back to 1893. The 1841 flood was also higher, as was the 1844 flood, and as was the 1974 flood. So yet again, we have what is written in our school textbooks being taught to our children, completely made up, completely without any factual basis whatsoever, Deputy Speaker. It also goes on, Deputy Speaker, it talks about the 2002-2006 drought as evidence of more frequent extreme weather. Well, Deputy Speaker, yes, the 2002-2006 drought was severe, as is the current drought, Deputy Speaker. Severe. And we in this Parliament are doing everything we can to support our regional areas that are suffering through this drought until it breaks, Deputy Speaker, and break it will. You only have to go, Deputy Speaker, to a nice chart which I've actually had printed and hung up in my room, which something that I believe should be distributed to all schools to counteract this misleading propaganda that they're being taught. It's titled 119 Years of Australian Rainfall. And when you look at it, it shows us exactly what Dorothy McKellar stated: we are a land of drought and flooding rains. And you can look back through our history, Deputy Speaker, for the last 120 years, that's what's happened. We had 3, 4, 5, 6 years of drought, then 3, 4, 5 years of rainfall, and that pattern has repeated over and over and over. And if you look at the data again from the Bureau of Meteorology, you look at rainfall in places like the Murray-Darling Basin, Deputy Speaker, all you see is great variability. There is no trend of continued drought, Deputy Speaker. Yet this is what is being taught to our children in our schools, indoctrinating them into a doomsday cult where they are being taught to believe that the world will end in 10 or 12 years, Deputy Speaker. I agree with the new comments from Longman, who made in the House yesterday, that if we are going to teach in our schools the issues of climate change, we need to teach them all the facts. We can't teach them some biased nonsense without any scientific backing, in fact the complete opposite of the scientific backing, without any factual data, taught like a religious text, Deputy Speaker, into our schools. Because what that does, when those children become indoctrinated into this cult, they, Deputy Speaker, we have seen, I've seen them in my office come through, they simply can no longer logically reason and look at the facts. We have seen, Deputy Speaker, people gluing themselves to the road. So brainwashed are they, so indoctrinated into this cult are they, that they glue themselves in the road. And how do they form these opinions? Yes, they may listen to the ABC and they may watch radio, Deputy Speaker. But when they are being taught this nonsense in our schools, Deputy Speaker, what hope do they have? Now, Deputy Speaker, I'd also, when it comes to the claims of how they are disproved that we are going more frequent extreme weather, again, the science and the data, a peer-reviewed paper published recently in Environmental Hazards by researchers from the Macquarie University and the University of Colorado, and published earlier this year, simply shows that there has been no increase in insurance losses from natural disasters and weather events from 1966 to 2017. In fact, Deputy Speaker, they found for cyclones the trend is declining. They found for bushfires the normalised losses, the trend is declining. They found actually the worst year we had, Deputy Speaker, in this period for natural disasters was 1966, when we had 2 major cyclones hitting Queensland, when we had droughts and we had floods and we had major fires, Deputy Speaker, affecting the nation. 1966. What chance is it that this peer-reviewed research, the details and the truth, will be taught in our schools? Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, it appears none. I would call on the ministers for Education in New South Wales to look at this text, this Pearson's History of New South Wales, and have it withdrawn, because it contains completely incorrect and false statements that is misleading our children in their schools.
And I call the member for Blair.